Friends, if you are someone who loves watching bold, dark, and experimental cinema, then Mad God 2021 is the kind of film that you absolutely must experience. And yes, in English. So, if you're excited about exploring this wild cinematic ride, then please like this video right now. And if this is your very first time visiting our channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because we bring you amazing updates, reviews, and deep dives into the most fascinating movies out there. In today's video, we are going to talk about a film that's not just a movie, it's an experience. The name of this film is Mad God, and it's unlike anything you've seen before. This movie is the brainchild of legendary visual effects artist Phil Tippett, and it took him over 30 years to bring this dark and haunting world to life. We'll tell you what this movie is about, how it was made, and most importantly, where you can watch it. Yes, friends, we will give you all the details about which OTT platform or satellite channel is currently showing this film so you don't miss out. But that's not all. In this video, we will explore the film from every angle. We'll talk about the technical aspects, such as the unique stop-motion animation, the eerie sound design, and the masterful use of practical effects that make this film visually stunning and totally unforgettable. We'll go into the pre-production process that started decades ago, the challenges faced during filming, how the film was finally completed after years of dedication, and the post-production magic that polished it into a masterpiece. We'll also talk about the film's budget and how it performed financially, considering it was such a niche and experimental project. Of course, we'll also walk you through the storyline, or rather the journey of Mad God, which is more like a visual fever dream than a traditional narrative. I'll give you a short review and explain what kind of audience will appreciate this film the most. We'll talk about what the film is trying to say, the hidden meanings, and how the dark, dystopian visuals reflect a deeper message about humanity and destruction. In addition to that, we'll also look at the cast and crew. Even though there isn't a conventional set of actors like in a typical film, we'll tell you who was involved in the making of the film, the voice artists, character models, and how each role contributed to the haunting world of Mad God. So friends, I highly recommend you stick with us until the end of the video, because this is a film that deserves your full attention, and we've got a lot of amazing information to share. Whether you're a fan of horror, science fiction, animation, or just love movies that break the mold, Mad God is a cinematic adventure you won't forget. Alright then, let's dive into the dark and mysterious world of Mad God 2021. Let's start the video. Alright friends, buckle up because Mad God 2021 is not your typical sit down and follow the plot kind of movie. No sir, this film throws out the rulebook and dives headfirst into a world of chaos, horror, and surrealism. If you're expecting a clear beginning, middle, and end, forget it. Mad God is a dark journey through a decaying, nightmarish universe, and it tells its story more through visuals, emotions, and atmosphere than through dialogue or a traditional plot. The movie opens with a mysterious figure known only as the assassin. Clad in a gas mask and trench coat, he's lowered deep into a decaying world via an ancient mechanical pod. That descent alone feels like stepping into another dimension. You pass crumbling ruins, grotesque creatures, endless destruction, and remnants of a world that's clearly been broken for a long, long time. There's no dialogue to hold your hand, just sound, texture, and the haunting landscapes pulling you in deeper. It's like watching a dream, or more accurately, a nightmare, unfold in slow, mesmerizing motion. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The movie doesn't really tell you what's going on in words. Shows you. Every scene is dripping with symbolism, and every corner of this hellish world is filled with bizarre creatures, decaying structures, and industrial madness. There are strange rituals, deformed beings, and twisted machines doing incomprehensible tasks. It's like a grotesque ballet of destruction and rebirth playing out in front of your eyes. The story isn't just linear, it loops, it stutters, it jumps into different perspectives, and sometimes it seems to reset entirely. There are moments where we leave the assassin's journey and dive into entirely different scenes. A lab with a godlike figure experimenting with life and creation, sequences that look like alternate realities, flashbacks, or even metaphorical detours. One moment you're in a battlefield of tortured souls, the next you're watching a bizarre birthing ritual that feels more like a science experiment gone horribly wrong. Time and space feel completely broken in this world, and that's the point. Key turning points. It's hard to define them like in a traditional story, But one clear shift happens when the assassin reaches his destination. What he's supposed to do isn't what actually happens, and we're yanked into a deeper layer of this decaying reality. Another huge moment is the appearance of the godlike being, possibly representing a higher power or the force of creation itself, tinkering with life and death as if it's all just a weird experiment. These moments shift the emotional tone, from dread and horror to something almost cosmic, philosophical, and tragic. And then there's the emotional impact. Despite the lack of dialogue, the film makes you feel everything: confusion, fear, awe, and even a strange kind of sadness. You feel like you're witnessing the end of a world, or maybe a cycle that keeps repeating forever. There's a sense of helplessness that lingers throughout, like everything is already doomed and we're just watching it all collapse in grotesque beauty. The themes are heavy: decay, war, control, creation, destruction, but they're presented in a way that keeps you completely hooked. In short, Mad God isn't a film you follow, it's a film you experience. It plays with time, perspective, and structure in a way that's meant to disorient you. It's like being dropped into someone's detailed and disturbing dream and just riding it out, scene by scene, without ever waking up. Every frame feels handcrafted, every moment soaked in meaning, even if that meaning isn't spelled out. It's weird, wild, and unforgettable. 3. Character development. Now let's talk about the characters of Mad God 2021. And this is where things get really strange, because in this film, characters aren't characters in the traditional sense. Don't expect big speeches, deep conversations, or emotional flashbacks. No one's sitting around sharing their dreams or talking about their childhood trauma. In Mad God, characters are more like silent symbols wandering through a surreal nightmare. But that doesn't mean they aren't powerful or meaningful. In fact, their silence makes them even more mysterious and intriguing. Take the main figure, the assassin. He's the closest thing we get to a protagonist, and even then we never hear his voice, we never see his face. He's fully covered in a gas mask and trench coat, moving through the twisted landscape like a lone traveler in a world that doesn't want him there. He's got a briefcase, a mission, and a purpose, though what exactly that purpose is becomes more and more ambiguous as the movie unfolds. He doesn't grow in the traditional sense, but you can feel his transformation through action, failure, and suffering. The deeper he goes, the more powerless he becomes. He begins as someone on a mission and ends up as just another victim of a collapsing system he never understood. Then we have other mysterious figures. There's a surgeon-like character who performs strange operations. There's a godlike entity, hidden in a celestial realm, overseeing creation and destruction like it's nothing more than routine work. These characters don't have names, but their presence is huge. They act more like archetypes: gods, creators, destroyers, victims. And through them the film says a lot about control, power, and meaninglessness. What's fascinating is how these characters interact, or rather, how they avoid typical interactions. There's almost no communication between them, no relationships as we know them. But the way they move around each other, the roles they play, and the actions they take build a kind of relationship with the world itself. The assassin's journey, for example, is less about who he meets and more about how the environment reacts to him. Every machine, every creature, every shadow seems to be watching, reacting, resisting him. It's a relationship between a character and the world. And in Mad God, the world is one of the biggest characters of all. And let's not forget the nameless, faceless workers and victims that populate this decaying world. They're crushed, burned, tortured, recycled over and over again. They don't grow, they don't escape, they don't rebel. But that's what makes them powerful. They represent the endless suffering, the pointlessness of routine destruction. They don't have arcs, they are the arc. They show us a world stuck in an endless loop of torment, where transformation is either impossible or meaningless. The brilliance of the character development in Mad God is that it throws away all the usual tools. No backstories, no spoken motivation, no redemption arcs, and yet somehow still makes you care, still makes you feel something. The characters are like living metaphors. You watch them and wonder, what does this mean? And even if you can't answer it, you're drawn in. Every twitch, every stumble, every grim, wordless stare adds a new layer to the madness. So while these characters may not grow in the way we're used to, they evolve in your mind. They leave questions hanging in the air. They haunt you a little. And by the end, you're not sure if they changed, or if you did just by watching them. That's the kind of character journey Mad God gives you. It's dark, cryptic, and unforgettable. For performances. Now here's where things take a wildly different turn, because Mad God 2021 isn't driven by conventional performances from actors. There are no dramatic monologues, no emotional close-ups, and definitely no Oscar-worthy speeches. Instead, the performances in Mad God come through in the most unusual, meticulous, and jaw-dropping way, through stop-motion animation. That's right, every gesture, every movement, every twitch of every character has been brought to life not by actors on a soundstage, but by masterful animators using puppets, miniatures, and an unimaginable amount of patience. But make no mistake, even without traditional actors, the characters in Mad God are bursting with personality. Let's talk about the assassin. He doesn't speak, his face is completely hidden, and yet he becomes this mysterious figure you can't stop watching. His slow, cautious movements, the way he surveys his surroundings, how he handles his briefcase, even how he stumbles through the filth and horror around him. It's all done with such deliberate physical storytelling that you forget you're watching a puppet. You believe in his fear. You feel his exhaustion. You sense that, even in silence, there's purpose behind every step. It's one of the most expressive performances you'll ever see. And there's not a single line of dialogue. Then there are the countless other characters and creatures populating this twisted world. Some are humanoid, others are grotesque abominations. And some are so bizarre you can't even describe them, but they all feel alive. That's the magic of Mad God. Whether it's a machine dragging a screaming figure across the floor, or a monstrous surgeon calmly performing an unnerving procedure, every single being feels inhabited. Their movements, often slow, sometimes erratic, occasionally horrifying, are the performances. You get terror, confusion, sadness, even comedy, all through motion and timing. The supporting cast, if you can call it that, includes a strange childlike creature that undergoes a mysterious transformation, masked workers trudging through endless labor, tortured souls twisted into furniture, and a godlike figure surrounded by mysterious forces of creation and destruction. Each one is performed in a way that makes them feel essential to this mad ecosystem. It's not about dialogue delivery or facial expression. It's about presence, weight, and rhythm. The animators are the true performers here, acting through their craft one frame at a time. And let's not forget the sound design, which plays a huge role in giving these characters their emotional depth. The grunts, groans, mechanical whirs, squelching footsteps, and eerie background sounds all enhance the performance. They make you feel like these figures have bodies, pain, breath, and history, even if they're made of plastic and clay. So while there may not be actors in the traditional sense, Mad God delivers performances that are unforgettable in their own right. It's all about the movement, the detail, the mood. These characters may be silent, but their stories are screaming through every frame. Watching them is like watching life itself twisted through a dark lens. Disturbing, fascinating, and hypnotic. 6. Cinematography. Alright friends, let's dive into one of the most jaw-dropping aspects of Mad God 2021. The cinematography. And let's get one thing clear right off the bat. This isn't your usual, let's set up the camera, get a wide shot, and call it a day kind of filmmaking. No, this is next-level, handcrafted, painstakingly composed visual storytelling, where every frame is dripping with detail, style, and atmosphere. It's like walking through a museum of nightmares, except the paintings move, squirm, explode, and sometimes melt right in front of you. In Mad God, the camera becomes your guide, your eyes, your only lifeline in this collapsing world of industrial hellscapes and biological horror. The angles are chosen with precision. Sometimes the camera creeps low and close, dragging you through piles of filth and guts, making you feel the grime on your skin. Other times it pulls back just enough to reveal vast, haunting environments, monolithic structures, endless corridors, towering machines. And you suddenly realize how tiny and powerless the characters really are in this universe. That contrast between claustrophobic close-ups and awe-inducing wide shots creates an emotional rhythm, a push and pull between dread and wonder. Lighting in this film. Absolutely insane in the best possible way. Shadows dominate most of the scenes, with sickly glows and flickering lights cutting through the darkness like dying embers. It's not just about seeing what's happening, it's about feeling it. The light seems to rot as it touches the surfaces, and the darkness isn't just absence. It's alive, full of threats and decay. You'll see scenes bathed in deep reds, glowing greens, harsh yellows, all giving the film a hauntingly beautiful yet poisonous look, like something that came out of a radioactive fever dream. And the textures. Oh, the textures. The cinematography doesn't just show you the world, it rubs your face in it. The framing lingers on decaying walls, rusting machinery, oozing fluids, grotesque creatures, and collapsing architecture. Every surface has weight. Every object tells a story. There are shots where you'll find yourself pausing just to admire the disgusting beauty of it all, whether it's a wide pan across a tortured landscape or a tight shot of some poor creature suffering. There are some visually iconic moments that will sear themselves into your brain. The descent of the assassin in his glass pod through layers of hellish terrain feels like a twisted fairy tale. The towering, crumbling cityscapes that look like a fusion of Geiger, Bosch, and a mechanic's worst nightmare. The surgical sequence with strange tools, pulsing organs, and eerie green light that feels like an alien operating room. The endless assembly lines of nameless, faceless laborers being crushed, burned, and reborn. Every one of these scenes is framed like a moving painting, dark, surreal, and unforgettable. But what really makes the cinematography so powerful is how it tells the story. With no dialogue and no exposition, the camera has to speak. And it does loud and clear. Leads your eyes. It hides things just out of frame. It reveals horror slowly, teasing you before fully unleashing the madness. Creates atmosphere so thick you can almost taste it. It holds still when you want to look away and moves when you want to pause. It builds tension, dread, and even a strange kind of beauty. So while Mad God may not have traditional actors or scripts, its cinematography is pure storytelling. Every light source, every angle, every frame is designed to drag you deeper into this decaying dream world. It's brutal, gorgeous, terrifying, and completely hypnotic. And once it pulls you in, there's no turning back. 5. Direction. Let's talk about the mad genius behind Mad God 2021. Phil Tippett. Yes, that Phil Tippett. The man who helped bring dinosaurs to life in Jurassic Park, who shaped the creatures of Star Wars, and who basically wrote the book on practical effects and stop motion. But here, in Mad God, he didn't just direct a movie. He opened a portal straight into his subconscious, lit it on fire, and invited us all to walk through the ashes. This is not just direction. This is pure, unfiltered artistic obsession. From the very first moment, Tippett establishes a tone that is grim, decayed, and hypnotic. You're not just watching a story, you're falling into it. The atmosphere is thick, almost unbearable at times, and that's exactly the point. Tippett doesn't want you to be comfortable. He doesn't want you to know where this is going. He wants you lost, disturbed, and wide-eyed. He wants your mouth open in awe and your stomach turning at the same time. And he pulls it off with masterful control. The pacing of Mad God is intentionally slow. Not boring slow, but dreamlike slow. You're not being pushed through a plot. You're drifting through an experience. Scenes play out with a kind of meditative dread, where the camera lingers on grotesque detail and twisted environments longer than you think it should, and then even longer than that. There are no quick cuts, no distractions. Tippett forces you to sit with the decay, to absorb the silence, to feel the weight of every squish, grind, and mechanical groan. It's bold, it's punishing, and it's kind of brilliant. And talk about stylistic choices. Where do we even begin? Tippett's direction throws away every conventional rule of modern filmmaking. Forget clean narratives, forget snappy dialogue, forget tidy resolutions. This is visual storytelling at its most primal. He leans hard into surrealism, body horror, steampunk, and dystopia, all without once flinching. He builds a world out of rust, filth, bones, wires, and nightmares. Every frame feels handcrafted because it literally is. This wasn't made in a rush. Took decades. And you feel every single hour of labor baked into the screen. Shot composition is out of this world. Tippett plays with scale constantly. Tiny characters against giant, crumbling monuments, hulking machines dwarfing fragile life forms. He uses depth and layers like a painter, placing visual chaos in the background while something quietly horrific plays out in the foreground. And every scene has movement, not just of the characters but of the world itself. Gears turn, flesh pulses, lights flicker, dust floats. The direction brings the entire environment to life like it's a character of its own. But maybe the most impressive thing Tippett does as a director is hold onto a singular, uncompromising vision. This is a movie that should not exist. No studio would dare greenlight something this bizarre, this wordless, this bleak. And yet Tippett spent years, decades, sculpting it into reality, frame by frame. That kind of vision doesn't just guide a film, it possesses it. And you feel that in every twisted alley, every twitching puppet, every haunting set piece. Tippett didn't just direct Mad God. He birthed it. This is the inside of his brain, fully unleashed. The mood he creates is impossible to shake. It's heavy, unsettling, mesmerizing. You're not watching a film, you're surviving it. The direction makes you question what you're seeing and what it all means, or if meaning even matters in a world this broken. It's challenging, it's strange, and it's kind of a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Phil Tippett didn't just point a camera. He conjured a nightmare and filmed every glorious, grotesque second of it. 7. Editing and pacing. Now let's get into the guts of Mad God 2021. The editing and pacing. And oh boy, this is not your typical popcorn flick with snappy scene changes and neat 3-act beats. This film doesn't hurry, it doesn't hold your hand, and it certainly doesn't apologize for dragging you through every moment like you're strapped to a slow-moving conveyor belt headed straight into an inferno. But that's the magic of it. The editing is the secret spell holding this beast together, because without it, the entire bizarre, pulsating nightmare would fall apart into chaos. The pacing of Mad God is, let's call it, hypnotically slow. It's like wandering through a dream where time has lost all meaning. Scenes don't rush to the next action beat. Instead, they settle, fester, and spread across the screen like mold. The editors clearly knew this wasn't a story you race through. This is a film you absorb. Every lingering shot, every slowly turning gear, every trudging footstep is part of the rhythm. It forces you to sit in the atmosphere, to let the grime seep into your bones. The editing invites you to stare. Not glance, not skip, stare. Transitions between scenes often feel seamless but surreal, like you've slipped from one level of a nightmare to the next without realizing it. There's no flashy crossfade or abrupt jump cut. Instead, one moment quietly bleeds into another. You go from an industrial hellscape to a surgical chamber, to a battlefield, to a cosmic explosion of creation and destruction, all without a clear door or exit. That's the genius of the editing. It's not built to organize the chaos, but to ride it. To stitch together madness in a way that feels like one endless, feverish hallucination. The rhythm of the film is where things get really interesting. There are long, slow sequences where the camera just follows a character walking through layers of ruin. It's meditative, heavy, almost unbearable. But then suddenly, something violent or grotesque explodes onto the screen. Boom, you're yanked from a slow drip into a full sprint. And then just as quickly, you're back in the silence, the sludge, the creeping dread. This push and pull of momentum keeps your senses on edge. It creates a strange emotional cycle. Tension, release, despair, awe, over and over again. There's very little conventional structure to the way scenes are cut. The story isn't laid out with easy signposts. It's more like a descent, a spiral. The editors lean into that structure or lack of it and make sure you feel the descent. And when things get abstract, and they definitely do, the editing becomes almost poetic. There are montages of strange rituals, pulsating life forms, decaying structures, and inexplicable machinery, all cut together with a rhythm that's more about feeling than clarity. You may not fully understand what's happening, but you can sense what it means. Even without dialogue, the timing of cuts is emotionally charged. A long, unbroken shot might build unbearable suspense. A sudden cut to something grotesque might jolt you like a jump scare. A quiet fade to black might give you a moment to breathe, or make you fear what's coming next. This is editing that manipulates your heartbeat without a single word. So is the pacing slow? Absolutely. Is it for everyone? Definitely not. But for the world Mad God creates, this glacial, methodical, unsettling tempo is the only way it could work. You're not here for a fast ride. You're here to drown in atmosphere. The editing doesn't just keep the film moving. It shapes the entire experience, dragging you deeper and deeper until you're not even sure where the film ends and your own weird thoughts begin. Soundtrack and score. Alright, buckle up because the soundtrack and score of Mad God 2021 are not just background noise. They're a full-on immersive experience that pulls you deep into the film's grotesque and haunting world. Phil Tippett's film is a visual and auditory feast, and the music plays a huge role in creating that dense, suffocating atmosphere. From the very start, the score sets the tone with eerie industrial sounds that feel less like music and more like the soundtrack of a dying machine, creaking and groaning as it slowly grinds to a halt. The composer doesn't bother with traditional melodies or catchy themes. Instead, the score is an artful mix of mechanical drones, metallic clangs, and unsettling ambient textures that sound like the marriage of a factory and a nightmare. These sounds are carefully layered and manipulated to blur the line between organic and inorganic, mirroring the film's visuals where flesh merges with rusted metal, and creatures seem part machine, part horror. The result is a sonic landscape that's as alien and disturbing as the visuals, making you feel like you're trapped inside the machinery of this collapsing world. What's really fascinating is how the score interacts with the scenes. It doesn't just play underneath. It reacts, it breathes, it moves with the film. There are moments when a low, pulsing drone builds tension slowly, like the tightening of a spring ready to snap. This kind of sound primes your nerves, making every subtle movement on screen feel loaded with threat. Then there are sudden, sharp metallic clangs or eerie screeches that slice through the silence like alarms, signaling danger or a monstrous reveal. The soundtrack becomes almost like a character itself, warning, teasing, and manipulating your emotions without a single word spoken. Silence plays a crucial role, too. In a film so dense with visual and auditory chaos, moments of quietness are like a gasp of fresh air, or sometimes a terrifying void. When the music drops out, you become hyper-aware of every tiny sound. The assassin's footsteps, dripping fluids, the distant hum of machines. These quiet interludes create an unsettling stillness that builds suspense and lets you catch your breath before the next wave of sonic assault. Tippett and the composer use these silences strategically, making the return of sound hit even harder and reinforcing the film's unsettling rhythm. Recurring musical motifs act like sonic signatures throughout the film. Maybe it's a subtle mechanical hum that signals the presence of something sinister lurking just out of sight, or a distorted industrial thrum that accompanies key moments of transformation or destruction. These motifs are woven throughout the score in a way that subconsciously ties the narrative and emotional beats together, helping you make sense of the chaos without any spoken exposition. It's a clever, non-verbal storytelling tool that deepens the immersion. One of the most impressive aspects is how seamlessly the soundtrack blends with the visual effects and sound design. The boundary between music and diegetic sound often blurs, creating an environment where the score feels like it's coming from the world itself. Whether it's the grinding of gears, the whir of machinery, or the groans of tortured creatures, the music feels integrated, not layered on top. This makes the entire experience feel like one cohesive organism, a living, breathing nightmare that surrounds and envelopes you. So, the soundtrack and score in Mad God are far more than just accompaniment. They are the emotional core and atmospheric glue of the film. They manipulate your emotions, build tension, and immerse you in a decaying dystopian world where every clang, hum, and whisper matters. This music doesn't just stay in your ears while you watch. It lingers long after, haunting your thoughts like the film itself. 9. Themes and messages. Mad God 2021 is like diving headfirst into a twisted, nightmarish rabbit hole where the usual storytelling rules get tossed out. But beneath all the gore and mechanical madness, there's a dark, rich stew of themes simmering away. This isn't just a film about a creepy assassin wandering through hellish landscapes. It's a bleak meditation on decay, control, chaos, and the cycle of destruction and creation that feels both ancient and disturbingly relevant. One of the most glaring themes is the idea of decay. Not just physical rot but societal, moral, and spiritual collapse. The world Tippett crafts is crumbling, a broken machine powered by despair and corruption. Every rusted gear and shattered creature feels like a metaphor for how systems, whether they be governments, economies, or even the human psyche, break down under the weight of their own flaws. This decay isn't just a backdrop. It's a living, breathing character in the film, suffocating everything in its path. Watching the assassin navigate this wasteland feels like watching humanity's own slow slide into entropy. Control and power are tangled up tightly in this nightmare too. The film shows strange rituals, grotesque hierarchies, and monstrous overlords manipulating the suffering masses below. There's this overwhelming sense that everyone is trapped, puppets on strings pulled by unseen forces, or cogs grinding away in a merciless machine. The assassin's journey might be one of rebellion or escape, but the oppressive systems around him are relentless and overwhelming, suggesting a commentary on how hard it is to break free from cycles of control and violence. Then there's the theme of transformation and mutation. Everything in Mad God is in a state of flux. Bodies merge with machines, identities blur, and what's alive is often indistinguishable from what's dead or artificial. This unsettling fusion questions what it means to be human or alive in a world dominated by technology and decay. It's a nightmare vision of evolution where progress looks more like distortion and corruption than growth. Chaos versus order is another undercurrent. The film never feels completely anarchic, despite the madness on screen. There's a strange, ritualistic structure to the madness. Cycles of destruction and creation, scenes that loop back on themselves, and repeated motifs. This hints at a cosmic or metaphysical balance, like even in the most chaotic systems, some order persists. The question the film seems to ask is this balance salvation or eternal damnation? Philosophically, Mad God feels like a meditation on suffering and the futility of existence. It's brutal, uncompromising, and often feels like a descent into despair. But in that despair, there's also a strange beauty and awe. It asks viewers to confront discomfort, confusion, and horror without sugarcoating anything. In doing so, it leaves a haunting impression about the fragility of life and the relentless passage of time. The themes aren't spoon-fed or neatly packaged. Tippett trusts you to grapple with the imagery and sounds, to find your own meaning in the swirling chaos. That open-endedness is part of the experience. Mad God doesn't just show you a story. It invites you to get lost in its twisted symbolism and come out with your own interpretation. It's like a puzzle made of rust and nightmares, challenging you to look deeper beyond the surface horror. In short, beneath the layers of grotesque puppetry and dystopian machinery, Mad God is a profound exploration of collapse, control, transformation, and the eternal struggle between order and chaos, all wrapped in a nightmarish vision that lingers long after the credits roll. 10. Visual effects and CGI. When it comes to Mad God 2021, the visual effects are not just a tool, they are the very essence of the film's haunting world. Phil Tippett, a legend in the realm of stop-motion and practical effects, leans heavily into old-school craftsmanship, but with a sprinkle of modern magic, creating a blend that feels tactile, visceral, and eerily alive. The film feels less like it's made on a computer and more like it was conjured in some dark, dusty workshop where puppets, clay, and steel come to life to tell a nightmarish tale. The practical effects are the real stars here. Every grotesque creature, every rusted machine, every decayed landscape is painstakingly handcrafted, giving the film a weight and texture that CGI alone rarely achieves. You can see the fingerprints of the artists in every frame, literally the bumps, scratches, and imperfections that make these miniatures and puppets feel tangible. This physicality draws you in and creates an immersive experience because it's impossible to detach yourself from something that feels so real and so painstakingly detailed. Watching these practical effects in motion is like witnessing a dark puppet theater where every twist and twitch carries intention and emotion. CGI isn't absent, but it plays a much more subtle, supportive role here. Instead of dominating the frame with glossy, over-polished digital effects, CGI is used to enhance or extend the practical elements, like adding smoke, fire, atmospheric depth, or subtle movement that would be impossible to achieve physically. This blend is seamless because the CGI is respectful of the film's handcrafted aesthetic. It doesn't jump out or scream, "digital," but instead acts like a ghostly whisper that makes the world feel bigger and more alive without stealing focus from the practical wonders. The combination of practical and digital effects creates a unique visual language that balances nostalgia and innovation. The textures you see, peeling paint, rust, grime, are all tangible, but the digital elements add a sense of otherworldliness and scale. This is crucial because Mad God exists in a surreal, nightmarish space that's part industrial wasteland, part twisted fantasy. The visual effects maintain this uneasy balance, never allowing the audience to get too comfortable or detached. What's especially fascinating is how the visual effects reinforce the film's themes of decay and transformation. The physical degradation of puppets and sets mirrors the narrative's obsession with rot and corruption. You literally watch the world breaking down before your eyes, piece by piece. At the same time, the subtle digital touches create moments of unsettling mutation or ethereal glow that hint at something beyond the physical, a world caught between life and death, reality and nightmare. There's also a deliberate roughness to the effects that enhances the unsettling mood. These visuals don't aim for slick perfection. They revel in imperfections and grime. This roughness makes every frame feel like a living diorama of horror, where the grotesque and beautiful collide. It's messy, it's raw, and it's deeply captivating. In essence, the visual effects and CGI in Mad God don't just exist to dazzle the eyes. They are integral to the storytelling. They create a tactile, immersive nightmare that feels handcrafted and haunted, blending physical artistry with digital enhancement in a way that pulls you deeper into the film's terrifying and mesmerizing world. 11. Set design and locations. Step into the world of Mad God 2021, and you're immediately swallowed by a universe so meticulously crafted it feels like stepping into a nightmare dollhouse gone wonderfully wrong. The set design here isn't just decoration. It's a vital character in itself, a sprawling, decaying labyrinth of rust, grime, and bizarre architecture that drips with atmosphere and mood. Every corner, every crevice is bursting with detail, inviting you to get lost in its twisted corridors and monstrous machines. Phil Tippett and his team have created environments that feel both ancient and futuristic, like remnants of a civilization caught in a perpetual cycle of ruin and rebirth. The sets are an astounding mix of mechanical detritus, dilapidated ruins, and fleshy, organic textures that blur the line between living and dead. Walking through these locations feels like exploring the guts of some colossal dying beast where everything is layered with decay. Peeling paint, corroded metal, dripping slime, and bizarre organic growths that seem almost alive. What really grabs you is the scale and density of these sets. It's not just about wide, empty wastelands. The film revels in claustrophobic tunnels, cramped chambers, and towering machines packed with wires, gears, and twitching appendages. The sets feel like mazes you could get lost in forever, each nook telling its own creepy story. This density adds a rich texture to the film, making the world feel inhabited, dangerous, and terrifyingly alive. Props and set pieces are equally impressive. Strange ritualistic objects, broken instruments, grotesque sculptures, and industrial debris litter the scenes, all painstakingly designed to enhance the unsettling mood. Each prop looks like it has a history, like it's been handled by countless tortured souls or used in unspeakable rites. This gives the world a lived-in authenticity that few films achieve, especially in a fantasy horror setting. The locations themselves, though all created in studios and workshops, feel like real, tangible places because of the extraordinary craftsmanship and attention to detail. There's no CGI-created blandness here. These are physical, textured spaces that interact with the puppets and actors in a believable way. The lighting and camera work further highlight these details, casting long shadows, catching the shimmer of rust, and revealing the grotesque beauty hidden in the decay. The sets also deepen the film's themes. The oppressive environments reflect the characters' struggles, claustrophobia, despair, and the relentless march of decay. They create a sense of entrapment and inevitability, like the world itself is a trap that tightens around its inhabitants with every tick of the clock. In short, the set design and locations of Mad God aren't just a backdrop. They are immersive, living nightmares that pull you into the film's grotesque universe. They add incredible depth, texture, and atmosphere, making the film's dark vision not just seen, but felt on every level. 12. Dialogue and script. Now, talking about dialogue and script in Mad God 2021 is a bit like trying to find a conversation at a silent party, because here words are almost non-existent. This film doesn't rely on chatter, witty banter, or emotional speeches to tell its story. Instead, it's a visual and atmospheric journey where silence and sound design take the lead, and the script is really a language of imagery, movement, and mood rather than traditional dialogue. If you're expecting sharp one-liners or memorable quotes to jot down, you're in for a surprise. The film's communication happens through the language of the grotesque, puppet movements, eerie sounds, and visual symbolism. Every tiny twitch or mechanical click becomes a word, every shadow and silhouette a sentence. The lack of spoken dialogue forces you to pay close attention to what's happening visually and emotionally, making the experience more visceral and immersive. In a way, the script is minimalist but profoundly expressive. The scenes unfold like a silent opera, where the story is told through carefully crafted actions, reactions, and the haunting environments. The assassin's journey is written in gestures and the choreography of his movements rather than spoken exposition. This absence of words challenges the audience to interpret and engage with the story on a deeper level, filling in the blanks with their own imagination. This storytelling approach gives Mad God a universal quality. There's no language barrier, no cultural filter. The emotions and themes come straight from the raw visuals and soundscapes, creating a primal connection. The script here is more about pacing, symbolism, and atmosphere, making it a daring departure from traditional narrative structures. There might be a few cryptic noises or occasional murmurs, but they're less about conveying specific information and more about adding to the eerie soundscape and texture. It's like the film speaks in a secret language of horror and decay, where every creak, groan, or distant scream is a meaningful line in its own right. So, while Mad God might not win any awards for dialogue writing, it redefines what a script can be, proving that sometimes silence and imagery say more than words ever could. The lack of conventional dialogue makes the film a unique and unforgettable storytelling experience that invites you to listen with your eyes and watch with your ears. 13. Genre execution. Mad God doesn't just step into the horror and dark fantasy genres. It stomps through them with a wrecking ball, smashing conventional expectations and then rebuilding the rules out of twisted metal and nightmare puppets. This film is a wild beast that both honors and appends genre traditions, creating something that's instantly recognizable yet utterly unlike anything else you've seen before. First off, forget the usual horror tropes like jump scares, clear villains, or straightforward narratives. Mad God trades in atmosphere, mood, and pure visual terror instead of cheap thrills or clichés. There's no typical plot to follow or heroes to root for. The suspense isn't about waiting for a monster to pop out, but about being trapped in a suffocating, decaying world that feels alive and hostile in every frame. The tension creeps in through the unbearable detail of the sets, the twitching puppets, and the relentless sense that something terrible is always just out of sight. In terms of action, the film is sparse but impactful. Instead of flashy fight scenes or explosive sequences, action comes in the form of mechanical movements, puppet manipulations, and slow, deliberate encounters that feel more like rituals than battles. The pacing is deliberately hypnotic, drawing you into a trance-like state where every tiny gesture is loaded with meaning. It's an action that's less about adrenaline and more about the mechanical grind of survival in a hellish realm. What's refreshing is how Mad God blends genres without trying to fit neatly into any single box. It's part horror, part dark fantasy, part experimental art film, and part stop-motion puppet theater. This hybrid identity lets it explore themes and visuals in ways that mainstream horror simply can't. There's no need for clear-cut scares or narrative closure here. Instead, it revels in ambiguity, dread, and a surreal, almost poetic visual language. Humor. Well, it's not the kind of film where you'll be laughing out loud, but there's a twisted, darkly ironic vibe running through the design and scenarios. The grotesque exaggerations and absurd mechanical contraptions sometimes border on the bizarrely comical, like a macabre circus gone terribly wrong. This odd humor adds a layer of unpredictability that keeps you on edge, unsure whether to be horrified or fascinated. Drama is subtle and embedded in the atmosphere rather than delivered through dialogue or character interaction. The emotional weight comes from the relentless depiction of decay, the haunting journey of the assassin, and the oppressive world itself. It's a drama of survival and futility, expressed visually rather than through typical storytelling beats. In short, Mad God takes genre conventions and twists them into a new form, one that's more about evoking mood, exploring themes, and creating a sensory experience than following a traditional formula. It's a daring, boundary-pushing work that challenges what horror and dark fantasy can be, inviting viewers into a strange, unsettling world where every frame is a masterpiece of eerie imagination. 14. Social and cultural commentary. Mad God is like a shadowy mirror held up to the darker corners of society, reflecting a world drenched in decay, control, and chaos. While it doesn't hit you over the head with slogans or speeches, its social and cultural commentary seeps through every rusted gear and nightmarish creature, weaving a subtle but powerful critique of contemporary issues. At its core, the film feels like an allegory for the destructive cycles of power, war, and environmental collapse. The world of Mad God is a place where machinery and flesh meld in grotesque ways, symbolizing how industrialization and human ambition can eat away at both nature and humanity itself. This isn't just a dystopian playground. It's a cautionary vision of unchecked technological dominance and the loss of empathy in a mechanized society. The endless, grinding gears and soulless machines hint at systems of control and oppression that trap individuals in cycles of violence and decay. The assassin's journey through this hellscape can be seen as a metaphor for resistance or rebellion against dehumanizing forces, but it's also tinged with futility and existential dread. There's a bleakness here that echoes anxieties about our own world, climate crisis, endless conflict, societal fragmentation, but it's delivered through symbolic visuals rather than direct commentary. Culturally, Mad God taps into fears about alienation and the erosion of individuality in the face of overwhelming systems, be they political, economic, or technological. The film's world is fragmented and chaotic, lacking clear heroes or villains, which reflects how modern issues often feel complex and unsolvable. It resists simple moralizing, instead presenting a nightmarish ecosystem where everything is interconnected yet hostile, echoing real-world tensions and uncertainties. The film handles these themes with an abstract, almost poetic touch that feels natural rather than forced. There's no heavy-handedness. The social messages arise organically from the world-building and imagery. This allows viewers to interpret and engage with the commentary on their own terms, making the experience both personal and thought-provoking. Sensitive topics like decay, death, and destruction are embraced openly but without sensationalism. Instead of exploiting these themes for shock value, Mad God uses them to explore the fragility and resilience of life amid chaos. The film's unsettling visuals create a space where viewers confront uncomfortable truths about mortality, power, and survival, wrapped in a surreal and haunting package. In essence, Mad God functions like a dark, cryptic poem about modern existence, inviting viewers to reflect on the precarious balance between creation and destruction, control and chaos, life and machine. Its social and cultural commentary isn't spelled out but lived through the atmosphere, making it a deeply immersive meditation on the state of the world through the lens of nightmare and art. 15. Audience engagement. Mad God isn't your typical popcorn flick that wraps everything up neatly or hits you with obvious emotional cues. Instead, it grabs you by the senses and drags you into a surreal, haunting world where feelings bubble under the surface and unexpected reactions spring from the strangest places. Watching it is less about following a familiar story and more about diving headfirst into an intense sensory and emotional experience. From the very start, the film hooks you with its eerie atmosphere and bizarre visuals. There's an almost hypnotic pull that keeps your eyes glued to the screen, even as you try to process what you're seeing. You might find yourself squirming, fascinated, or even mesmerized by the grotesque puppetry and nightmarish environments. It's a strange mix of shock and awe that triggers a kind of visceral response. It's like watching a beautiful, twisted dream unfold before your eyes. The emotional resonance here isn't delivered through dialogue or traditional character arcs but through mood, tone, and symbolism. Moments of intense dread or eerie calm can sneak up on you, creating a roller coaster of feelings that's subtle but powerful. There are times when the silence presses in so heavily it becomes almost deafening, making you hyper-aware of every creak and shuffle. This alone can send chills down your spine. Surprisingly, there's a weird sort of dark humor embedded in the absurdity of some scenes. The grotesque designs and bizarre mechanical creatures can elicit a nervous chuckle or a gasp of disbelief. This unexpected blend of horror and twisted whimsy adds layers to your emotional engagement, keeping you guessing and off balance in the best way. Mad God also invites deep reflection. It's the kind of film that demands your full attention and rewards multiple viewings. Each time you watch, you notice new details, subtle visual clues, and symbolic gestures that deepen your understanding and emotional connection. It sparks questions about the nature of the world it depicts and, by extension, about real-world fears and struggles. This film also stirs conversation. Its unconventional style and ambiguous narrative leave plenty of room for interpretation, encouraging viewers to discuss theories, symbolism, and the meaning behind the haunting imagery. It's a shared experience that turns watching into an exploration, where audience engagement extends far beyond the runtime. In essence, Mad God captures and holds your attention by being unlike anything else out there. It's not about easy emotions but about creating a strange, immersive journey that shakes you up, makes you think, and sticks with you long after the credits roll. 16. Comparisons to similar films. When you put Mad God side by side with other films in the horror, dark fantasy, and stop-motion realms, it's like comparing a twisted, nightmarish symphony to a collection of familiar tunes. This film doesn't just fit into a category. It practically invents its own, standing apart with its unique blend of painstaking stop-motion animation, grimy aesthetics, and an almost hypnotic experimental narrative style. Compared to classic horror or dark fantasy movies that rely heavily on traditional storytelling, characters, and jump scares, Mad God feels like an art installation brought to life. It shares some DNA with films like Jan Svankmajer's Surreal puppet horrors or the unsettling stop-motion work in Coraline and The Nightmare Before Christmas, but it dials everything way up into a disturbing, visceral fever dream. Where those films may mix whimsy with darkness, Mad God dives straight into an oppressive, bleak underworld where the surreal is relentless and often deeply unsettling. In the context of Phil Tippett's own filmography, Mad God is a labor of love decades in the making, and it's unlike anything else he's done. Tippett is legendary for his visual effects on blockbusters like Star Wars and Jurassic Park, where he blended practical effects with CGI to create believable creatures. But here, he goes full auteur, crafting a wholly personal and intensely tactile world using stop-motion puppetry and miniatures that feel tangible and raw. The film becomes a showcase of his mastery and obsession with physical effects in an era dominated by digital filmmaking. If you're thinking about films that explore dystopian or apocalyptic themes with heavy visual symbolism, you might recall works like The Thing, Tetsuo, The Iron Man, or even The Twisted Industrial Nightmare of Brazil. Yet Mad God doesn't just borrow from these. It creates its own vocabulary of decay, combining mechanical horror with a surrealist edge that's both timeless and unervingly modern. Unlike more narrative-driven or dialogue-heavy films in similar genres, Mad God relies almost exclusively on mood, sound, and visuals. This experimental approach puts it closer to abstract art films or experimental shorts, but with a feature-length runtime that demands dedication and rewards patience. So, when you stack Mad God against its peers, it's less about following formulas and more about breaking molds. It's a film that challenges genre boundaries, a handcrafted nightmare that celebrates the tactile and the grotesque in ways few other movies dare to. Whether you're a fan of horror, animation, or avant-garde cinema, Mad God offers an experience that's as unique as it is unforgettable, carving out a space all its own in the cinematic landscape. 17. Symbolism and metaphors. Step into the world of Mad God and you're immediately submerged in a dense tapestry of symbolism and metaphor, where every shadow, rusted cog, and grotesque figure feels loaded with meaning waiting to be unpacked. This film is like a visual puzzle box, inviting you to dig beneath the surface and discover layers of hidden significance that enrich its dark, apocalyptic tale. One of the most striking recurring motifs is the relentless presence of machinery and decay. The endless gears, pipes, and mechanical monstrosities aren't just background scenery. They symbolize the grinding, dehumanizing forces of industrialization, war, and the loss of individuality. These mechanical elements seem to represent oppressive systems that strip away life and identity, turning living beings into cogs in a monstrous, soulless machine. The assassin's journey itself is rich with metaphorical weight. He could be seen as a representation of the human will to confront chaos, destruction, and the unknown. His slow, deliberate descent into the depths of this hellscape feels like a pilgrimage through the darker sides of existence, death, rebirth, and the search for meaning amid ruin. His actions suggest themes of obsession, punishment, and perhaps the eternal struggle against forces beyond control. There's also a strong sense of cycles and repetition in the film's imagery. Scenes that mirror or echo one another suggest the idea of history and suffering repeating endlessly. This cyclical nature ties into broader themes of destruction and renewal, hinting that this dystopian nightmare is not a one-time event but a continuous loop of decay and despair. Visual cues like eyes, sometimes mechanical, sometimes organic, pop up repeatedly, evoking themes of surveillance, awareness, and the blurred line between observer and participant. The eye motifs might symbolize how life and death, watcher and watched, are intertwined in this grim universe. The grotesque creatures and hybrid forms scattered throughout the film feel like metaphors for mutation and the distortion of nature. They embody the unnatural consequences of unchecked ambition and the blending of flesh with machine. These beings often appear trapped or tortured, emphasizing themes of suffering, loss of control, and the breakdown of natural order. Colors and lighting play their own symbolic roles, too. The pervasive darkness punctuated by sickly glows and harsh shadows creates an atmosphere of despair, but also highlights moments of revelation or danger. The contrast between light and dark could be read as a metaphor for knowledge versus ignorance, hope versus despair, or life versus death. Even the architecture and environments serve symbolic purposes. The labyrinthine structures feel like mental or spiritual prisons, amplifying the film's exploration of entrapment and the struggle for escape. These spaces are claustrophobic and oppressive, reinforcing the emotional weight of the narrative's themes. In short, Mad God is a feast of symbolism and metaphor that transforms its nightmarish visuals into a profound commentary on destruction, control, and human resilience. Each frame is packed with meaning, inviting viewers to explore and interpret its haunting images again and again, discovering new layers that deepen the film's unsettling yet mesmerizing impact. 18. Franchise or historical context. Mad God doesn't slot into a traditional franchise or a direct sequel line, but its roots run deep in the history of experimental and stop-motion animation, as well as the long career of its creator, Phil Tippett. Think of it as a culmination of decades of artistic exploration and mastery of practical effects, standing as both a unique film and a kind of historical artifact that bridges old-school filmmaking techniques with modern storytelling ambitions. Unlike blockbuster franchises that rely on tight narratives or recurring characters, Mad God exists more as a spiritual successor to a lineage of visionary, often underground animation and horror works. Tippett's background in creature design and special effects for massive franchises like Star Wars and Jurassic Park informs this film, but here he breaks free from those narrative constraints to deliver a personal, haunting vision that's almost like an experimental gallery exhibit. It's less about continuing a story and more about pushing the boundaries of what cinematic storytelling can be through tactile, physical artistry. Historically, the film also feels like a nod to the golden age of stop-motion and practical effects, reminding us of the painstaking craftsmanship behind classic horror and fantasy films. The decades-long production timeline, over 30 years, gives it an almost mythic status in the world of animation, a labor of love that's part art project, part cinematic relic. Watching Mad God is like stepping into a time capsule where the painstaking hands-on techniques of the past collide with the digital age's appetite for innovation. Though it's not rooted in any real historical event or period, the film's bleak, industrial landscapes evoke a post-apocalyptic world that feels like a twisted reflection of 20th-century anxieties: industrial decay, war, environmental destruction, and the fear of technology running amok. It taps into a collective cultural unease that has been explored in dystopian art and cinema for decades, placing Mad God within a larger conversation about humanity's relationship with progress and destruction. In essence, while Mad God doesn't follow a franchise storyline or recreate history, it situates itself in a rich historical context of filmmaking traditions and cultural themes. It serves as both a monument to practical effects artistry and a provocative piece in the continuum of dark, experimental cinema. It's a film that honors its past while boldly forging its own path, offering something rare in today's landscape: a true one-of-a-kind cinematic experience born from history, passion, and vision. 19. Budget and box office. Mad God is a fascinating case when it comes to budget and box office because it's not your typical Hollywood blockbuster fueled by millions of dollars and aggressive marketing campaigns. Instead, this film is more like an underground masterpiece crafted with painstaking dedication over decades. The budget was relatively modest compared to big studio productions, especially considering the sheer scope and ambition of its stop-motion animation. It's a labor-intensive process, and Phil Tippett's choice to stick with traditional practical effects rather than jump into full CGI likely helped keep some costs down, but it also meant the production took a huge amount of time and meticulous effort, more of a passion project than a commercial enterprise. In terms of production quality, Mad God punches well above its financial weight. The detail in the puppetry, set design, and animation is jaw-dropping, showcasing a level of craftsmanship that rivals or even surpasses much bigger budget films. Every frame feels handcrafted, rich with texture and atmosphere, which makes the film a visual feast despite not having the deep pockets of a blockbuster. This is the kind of movie where you can feel the artist's hands in every motion and shadow, a real testament to how creative vision can triumph over budget limitations. When it comes to box office, Mad God was never positioned to dominate mainstream theaters or rake in massive ticket sales. Its appeal is more niche, catering to fans of experimental cinema, animation aficionados, and those fascinated by dark, surreal art. That means its theatrical run was limited, and the film didn't make waves in the typical box office sense. It found more success in film festivals, special screenings, and through digital and home video releases, where dedicated audiences could discover and appreciate its unique style at their own pace. Marketing for Mad God was naturally very different from the flashy trailers and billboard blitzes of big studio movies. The buzz came mostly from word of mouth, industry insiders, and the growing reputation of Tippett's long-anticipated project. This grassroots approach fits perfectly with the film's underground vibe but also limited its mainstream visibility, meaning the box office numbers were never the main focus. Instead, the film's success is measured more by its impact on audiences who value artistic innovation and the revival of classic filmmaking techniques. So, while Mad God may not have smashed box office records or become a blockbuster hit, it more than made up for that with its incredible production quality and the deep admiration it earned from cinephiles and critics alike. It's a perfect example of how a film's true value isn't always reflected in dollars earned, but in the lasting impression it leaves on its viewers and its contribution to the art of cinema. 20. Where to watch. If you're itching to explore the eerie, nightmarish world of Mad God, you might be curious about the best ways to experience this film. Unlike mainstream blockbusters that flood theaters worldwide, Mad God is more of a rare gem, an indie marvel that doesn't have the usual wide theatrical release. When it first debuted, it was mainly showcased at film festivals and select art house theaters, making those screenings a special event for fans of experimental cinema and stop-motion animation. Catching it on the big screen at one of these venues is like seeing a masterpiece unveiled. Every detail of the painstakingly crafted sets, puppets, and shadows comes alive in a way that smaller screens just can't match. For those who missed the limited theatrical runs, don't fret. Mad God has found a comfortable home on digital platforms and specialty streaming services that cater to niche audiences who appreciate the avant-garde and the visually intense. Streaming platforms like Shudder, Mubi, or other curated art house services often feature Mad God because it fits perfectly with their selection of horror, experimental, and animation works. Watching it on these platforms means you can dive into this dark odyssey anytime you want, from the comfort of your living room at your own pace. But here's a pro tip. If you really want to get the most out of the experience, set yourself up with a good sound system and a high-definition screen. The film's atmosphere is a huge part of its power. The unsettling sound design, the chilling silence, the creaking mechanical noises, and the haunting score all weave together to pull you into its twisted world. Watching on a big screen with quality speakers lets these layers envelop you, heightening the tension and the immersive experience. It's not just a movie, it's an environment. For the collectors and superfans, there are special edition physical releases like Blu-rays and DVDs that come packed with bonus features. These editions are pure gold because they include behind-the-scenes footage, interviews with Phil Tippett, and fascinating insights into the painstaking stop-motion animation process that took decades to complete. These extras add a whole new layer of appreciation, revealing the craftsmanship and dedication behind every frame. Owning a physical copy lets you revisit the film anytime and dive deeper into its artistic magic. Whether you're watching in a cozy theater, streaming quietly at home, or flipping through a collector's edition, Mad God invites you to lose yourself in its dense, surreal universe. It's the kind of film that rewards patience and curiosity. Every viewing can uncover new details and meanings. So, whether you're a stop-motion enthusiast, a horror aficionado, or just a curious viewer looking for something truly different, Mad God is waiting for you on platforms that celebrate cinema as an art form. Prepare yourself for a journey that's haunting, visually stunning, and unlike anything else out there. Just press play and let the descent begin.